Giles, welcome to the Park Den.
Thank you, John.
Your album, Armchair Orienteer, some fantastic tracks on here, but what really interests me about, there's Irish, European, Arabic and more. I mean, where did this journey begin for you? I mean, it's like, how do you get to here? And you've been doing this a long time, but where did it start? What interested you to make you, pick up the violin and then travel and learn all this European, Arabic? What drove you there?
Well, I started out as a classical player, really. At school, at least, I learned the violin there, and never particularly took to it. I played in the orchestra and did all the usual things, Beethoven and Mozart and all that. And I kind of retook up the instrument in my 20s because I thought it's such a great instrument for, its potential in so many different kinds of music. And I started when I moved to London in kind of late 70s, I suppose. There was still the kind of end of the Irish music scene, the old kind of Irish scene of sessions in the pubs and things. And I got really into that and kind of learnt lots of Irish stuff in the pub. And I suddenly realised that there was a great potential there, I suppose, that the instrument wasn't just something you had to play in the orchestra to a great kind of technical degree, that it was something that was a really social thing, a sociable thing, that you could if you played fiddle, you could go anywhere pretty much and find a session and play with people, meet people, have a good time. And from that I also had an interest from quite an early age in like medieval and Renaissance music, because I studied as a chorister and sung that kind of music. And from that, I think I also got interested in the other end of Europe, kind of the Arab world, which has kind of close links with some of it. And so that part of the journey, if you like, came through a trip I'd made to Egypt with an early music group called Dufai Collective. And I loved the place and went back there and studied a bit. And so
is this the Sinai desert bit?
That came later. That was with some dancers, little tours that went out there into the desert. Fantastic place, like kind of really, well, deserted, but not in quite the way you might think. It's kind of a bit more kind of less austere, perhaps, than you might think. Fantastic kind of light and.
So, I mean, were you mixing with other musicians when you were there in Egypt and places, and that's where you were sort of, finding other fiddle players that of an Arabic style and going, what can I learn from this person? Yeah,
I mean, I went back when I first went back to Egypt. I studied fiddle with a player called Ashraf Sharki, who. And it was very interesting because, in classical music you study very technically, like you do your scales for this it was very much you sit next to your teacher and you imitate, you just do a lot of imitation. And after a while, these things start to kind of get in your fingers, and it was actually a really nice way to learn. And then subsequently I went back there and played with other players and in the desert, of course, it's more Bedouin players playing their own particular kind of music, which is a little bit more difficult to join in as a fiddle player because it's the instruments are a bit different. They have a plucky thing called a zimzimiya, which is very strummed, kind of rhythmic strum thing, and they do a lot of singing and percussion. But that was great music as well.
So there's a lot of travel involved. And obviously you spent a bit of time in Ireland, touring.
Yes, just kind of wandering around and going to kind of various flowers and playing in sessions and that kind of thing. You know, the usual things you do in Ireland if you're a fiddle player.
Right,
Drinking
right.
lots of Guinness, basically.
And this album, obviously, was your first band, the Dufay Collective, or where did it start? You know, your career. What was the first act that you were in? I guess on a professional basis.
Yeah, well, I actually started out with a theatre company called the Medieval Players, and they were a small touring theatre company, and they used to go round with a booth and trestle stage, which the company had to put up every night, lugging these trestles out of the van, and a very simple, setting. So just a curtain at the back, and but it's a very skills-based theatre. You know, juggling, stilt walking, fire eating, but they used to do things like Chaucer in kind of original English, and so that was a kind of quite an interesting introduction to kind of performance in a way, seeing lots of actors, it being very immediate, that the kind of acting side of performance, and that was a great kind of education, touring around the country and various foreign trips as well. We went to Australia a couple of times.
Wow!
And it was a great few years.
Okay, and then after that, I guess that was what the Carnival Band came out after.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
because Andy Watts was actually a musical director of the Medieval Players, and he thought up the idea of the Carnival Band. And so actually the Carnival Band is kind of pretty much the oldest of those groups, I guess, most long-serving.
Yeah, and so and that's also if it was the Medieval Players, obviously there's a thread all the way through up until now.
Yeah,
which is great. And then Dufay Collective, where did that come in?
That came in. Well, again, there's a connection because Bill Badley, it was kind of mainly his idea, and Bill was a guitarist in the Carnival Band,
Right.
and so that kind of was part of that, kind of intersected with that idea, but was obviously more strictly medieval and Renaissance group.